I'm Josh, and I always pictured this moment. Standing beside the woman I loved as we welcomed our first child into the world, as something sacred. Like the world would pause, the heavens would crack open, and time itself would hold its breath for us. Instead, everything started to unravel. Hannah and I had been married 3 years when we found out she was pregnant. It was a surprise, sure, but a good one. The kind that makes you laugh nervously and then cry in the middle of the kitchen with an unopened bottle of sparkling cider on the counter. I remember hugging her that day and feeling like we were finally becoming a family. Like this was what all the long nights, the budgeting, the compromises, the therapy sessions, what they had all been leading toward. We picked out a crib together. She cried in the car the first time we heard the heartbeat. I built IKEA furniture with my bare hands like it was some kind of rite of passage. I read the books. I went to the appointments. I held her hair back during the morning sickness months. We fought over baby names like it was the final round of a boxing match. But in the end, we'd settled on Noah. Noah James Anderson. Strong, timeless. A name we'd both agreed on. Carved into the wood of a little rocking horse I bought from a flea market and spent weeks refinishing. We were ready, or at least we thought we were. Fast forward to the morning everything cracked. It was 4:47 a.m. when Hannah's water broke. She stood barefoot in the hallway, wrapped in one of my old college hoodies, eyes wide with a mixture of pain and awe. "It's happening," she whispered, like she couldn't believe it herself. I've never moved so fast in my life. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Me fumbling through red lights with my hazard lights on, while Hannah breathed through contractions in the passenger seat. I kept my hand on her knee the whole time, telling her, "We've got this. I'm right here. Just hold on." We got checked in. She changed into the gown. Monitors beeped. Nurses came and went, and I did everything I could to stay calm. I didn't leave her side, not even to grab a coffee. Hours passed in a haze of pain, ice chips, and nervous jokes. She gripped my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. I didn't care. I wanted to be there for every second. I thought we were doing it, together, and then came the pushing. She was screaming, crying, swearing. I kept brushing her damp hair away from her face, whispering encouragements like, "You're doing amazing," and "He's almost here, babe." And then, it happened. She clenched her teeth, her voice ragged and broken, and through the pain, she whispered, "Ryder." I froze. My body reacted before my brain could. Everything in me recoiled. "Ryder?" I looked at her. Her eyes were shut tight, face contorted in agony. She didn't seem to realize what she'd said, but I heard it, clear as day. A name we'd never discussed. A name that had never once come up in months of name debates. The nurse standing next to us turned her head and looked at me. Just a flick of the eyes. But that look, it said everything. Like she'd seen this kind of thing before. Like she knew something wasn't right. I brushed it off. Told myself she was delirious from the pain. I tried to focus on the moment, to stay in it. But my heart was no longer in that room. It took 12 more minutes for our son to arrive. I should have been crying, laughing, something. But when they handed him to me, this tiny, beautiful, wrinkled creature wrapped in a white blanket, I felt disconnected. Like I was watching someone else live my life. Hannah was crying, saying, "He's perfect. Isn't he perfect, Josh?" And I nodded. I said all the right things. I smiled for the photos. I cut the umbilical cord. I held her hand while the doctor finished up. I told her how proud I was. But that name, Ryder, kept echoing in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Later, when we were alone in the room, I almost asked her about it. The name. But she was lying there, exhausted, glowing in the aftershock of motherhood. Her skin was pale, her eyes heavy, and she looked so at peace. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not then. Not in that moment. Instead, I sat in the recliner next to her hospital bed, with our newborn asleep in my arms, pretending nothing had happened. Pretending I hadn't just heard the beginning of the end slip from my wife's lips. But inside me, something had shifted. A crack had formed. And even though I didn't know it yet, that tiny fracture would grow wider with every passing day. Because once you hear a name like that, spoken with that kind of softness, that kind of familiarity, you can't unhear it, especially when it's not yours. After we brought our son home, everything should have been golden. That's what everyone tells you. Newborn haze, sleepless nights, diaper explosions, but beneath it all, joy. You're supposed to be overwhelmed in the best way, drowning in love, even when you're running on 3 hours of sleep and cold coffee. And sure, the exhaustion hit hard. We were both running on fumes. But it wasn't just that. Something was off. Not like a sharp turn, more like a slow drift. And at first, I convinced myself it was in my head. Started small. Hannah would call him my little R. Under her breath, always when she thought I wasn't listening. It made my stomach twist every time. Once, I even tried to laugh it off. Said, "You're already giving him a rapper name?" She gave a soft smile, but her eyes didn't match it. She didn't deny it either. I didn't ask her about the name. I should have. God, I should have. But instead, I buried it. I buried a lot of things. She started going out more, too. Not often, just enough to notice. She said it was for her mental health, that she needed to get out of the house. And of course, I encouraged her. I wanted her to have balance. I didn't want to be the controlling husband who panics every time his wife puts on lipstick. But it wasn't just that. It was how she changed. The way she would check her phone and flip it screen side down the second I walked in. The way she smiled less. The way her touch became quick, like a reflex instead of affection. She used to tuck herself into my side on the couch like it was second nature. Now, we sat with a cushion between us, always something in her hands, her phone, a baby bottle, anything. I blamed it on the stress. New parents. Hormones. The baby blues. I read every article I could find. Watched every video about postpartum distance and how to support your partner through it. I was trying. I really, truly believed it was just a phase. But then came the night I couldn't explain away. It was around 2 a.m. Our son had finally gone back to sleep after one of those marathon crying sessions that made you want to trade your soul for 5 uninterrupted hours. I was lying in bed next to Hannah, both of us finally drifting off when I heard her murmur something. At first, it didn't register. I thought she was talking in her sleep. But then I heard it again. My little R. My sweet boy. I turned to look at her. She was on her side, facing away from me, her lips still moving, her hand tucked beneath her cheek like a child. And the way she said it, soft, dreamy, full of warmth, it made my chest tighten. She never called Noah by his name in those moments. Only R. The next morning, I brought it up in the lightest way I could. Over coffee, I said, "Hey, I think you were talking in your sleep last night." Called the baby R. Again. She didn't look up, just stirred her coffee and mumbled, "Oh, probably just short for rock star. You know how we joke he's dramatic." That wasn't a joke we had ever made. But I laughed. Like a fool. I laughed and moved on because the alternative, that something deeper was wrong, was too terrifying to face at 7:30 in the morning on 4 hours of sleep. And so I kept making excuses. When she started volunteering again at the animal shelter, I didn't question it. Even when she was gone for long stretches and came back with clothes that smelled faintly of cologne I didn't wear, I told myself she was just around other people. She needed to feel useful again, needed to reconnect with who she was before motherhood. When she began locking her phone, I told myself it was for privacy. Not for me, of course, just in case she lost it. When she changed her passwords, I didn't ask why. I told myself it was because she was finally setting boundaries. That's what therapy taught us, right? But the truth is, I saw the signs. I just didn't want to believe them. One evening, she came home from the shelter wearing a hoodie that wasn't hers. I knew it wasn't. Hannah always wore those oversized sweatshirts with band logos or paint stains. This one was plain black, structured, with a logo I didn't recognize stitched into the sleeve. It was a man's hoodie. I could tell. New. I asked casually, trying not to let my voice shake. She hesitated for half a second. Just a flicker. "Oh yeah," she said, shrugging it off. "They gave it to me at the shelter. It was cold." I nodded. I didn't ask who they was. I didn't ask why she didn't just wear her own coat. I didn't ask why she didn't smell like the usual mix of dog shampoo and bleach that she used to come home with from her volunteer shifts. Instead, there was that scent again, clean, masculine, musky. Not mine. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I needed sleep, that I was imagining things, that I was letting the name Ryder become bigger than it was. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I started noticing everything. The way she would smile at her phone, then quickly look away when I walked by. How she stopped initiating any kind of affection. The way she would get oddly defensive if I asked basic questions, like where she went or who she was texting. "You don't trust me anymore?" she snapped one night, after I asked her if the shelter needed her again that week. "It's not that," I said. "I just miss you." She stared at me for a long time, like she wanted to say something else. Then she looked down and whispered, "I'm tired, Josh." That's all she gave me. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. We went to bed that night with our backs to each other. And that's when I finally started wondering if I had already lost her. And I was the last one to realize it. I don't know what I was hoping to find when I opened that jewelry box. It was a Tuesday afternoon and Hannah was at the shelter again. Said she'd be home late, that a litter of kittens had come in and they were short-staffed. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I'd been living with that pit in my stomach for weeks, and it wasn't going anywhere. I was looking for, I don't know, maybe reassurance, maybe proof that I was imagining things. But what I found was the opposite. The jewelry box wasn't locked. It sat quietly on her dresser, unassuming, next to her perfumes and makeup brushes. I hesitated before opening it, fingers hovering above the lid like maybe it would burn me. Like once I saw what was inside, I couldn't go back. I opened it anyway. It looked normal at first. Rings, earrings, little knotted necklaces, tangled in that way jewelry always is. But near the back, tucked beneath a felt flap, was a pendant I'd never seen before. Small, oval, old-looking, almost antique. Silver with a delicate chain. Nothing flashy. I flipped it over. Engraved on the back were two letters, R+H. My heart dropped. R. Not J. Not me. R+H. I must have stood there for a solid minute, frozen, like the world had paused to let the weight of those letters sink in. I took a photo of the pendant with my phone, hands shaking, then carefully placed it back exactly where I found it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw it across the room. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I already knew. That night, I said nothing. I watched her as she sat across from me at dinner, smiling, talking about how one of the kittens fell asleep in her lap. She laughed, told me how she almost cried because it reminded her of when we first adopted our cat, Maple. She reached across the table and touched my hand like everything was normal. And all I could think about was that pendant. Later that week, when she left her laptop open on the dining table, I told myself I wasn't going to look, that I wasn't going to stoop to spying, to digging. But I did. The laptop was still logged into her user account. Just one click and I was in. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. First, I opened her photos, nothing. Just baby pictures, selfies, **TS of recipes. Normal stuff. But when I opened her documents folder, I found a subfolder labeled simply letters. It was buried, hidden 2 folders deep under volunteer stuff and notes. There were Word docs, lots of them, some titled for our, others with no titles at all. I opened one, and then another, and another. They weren't just notes. They were love letters, confessions, pages and pages of emotion poured out like she was living a secret life in plain text. One read, "I keep telling myself this was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But the way you looked at me that day, how can something that felt so right be so wrong?" Another, "Sometimes I watch Josh holding the baby, and it breaks me. You're the one I imagined standing there. You're the real father in spirit, if not in blood." That one made me feel physically ill. I had to stand up and walk away from the table just to breathe. The worst part? Some of them were dated before she got pregnant. She'd been writing to him before she ever told me we were expecting. While I was out here planning nursery themes and researching bottle brands, She was pouring her heart out to someone else. Someone named Ryder. I found emails too. Not current ones. She'd deleted most of her inbox. But in the drafts folder, there was one unfinished message. You once asked me if I regretted anything. The truth is, I regret not telling you I was pregnant. Not first. Not before Josh. But I couldn't face what that would mean. I didn't need a DNA test. I didn't need a confrontation. I didn't need her to say it. I knew. She had been living two lives. One with me where she was a wife, a mother, the woman I thought I knew. And another with him. This shadow world of longing and secrets and names that didn't belong in our home. When she got back that night, I was sitting on the couch, holding one of the baby's stuffed animals. A tiny bear I had picked out on a whim during a grocery run, just because it made me think of him. I looked at her when she walked in, and I saw her differently, not as the woman I married, not even as the woman who gave birth to our son, but as a stranger wearing her face. She smiled, tired and soft. Hey babe, sorry I'm late. The kittens were chaos. I nodded. No worries. I didn't mention the pendant, or the letters, or the email. Not yet, because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was certain, and something in me had started to go cold. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw the laptop across the room like some dramatic movie scene. I just closed it slowly, gently, almost like I was afraid to wake something. Maybe it was myself. That night, I lay next to Hannah in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Our son was asleep down the hall, making those little cooing sounds that had once filled me with joy. Now they just made my chest ache. I kept wondering how long it had been fake, if it ever was real. By morning, I couldn't stay. I packed a bag, just a small one. A few clothes, my laptop, a shaving kit. No note, no explanation. I didn't even take my toothbrush. I'd figure it out later. I told myself it wasn't running away. I just needed space. I needed time to think, to breathe, to remember what it felt like to not live under the same roof as a question I didn't want the answer to. So I drove. No destination, just the road. Eventually, I ended up in Vermont, a place I hadn't thought about in years. My cousin Colin lived there. Technically a second cousin, but we'd been close when we were kids. He'd always been the wild one, the one who ran away from family expectations, lived in the woods, grew a beard before I could grow stubble. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 4 years, not since my wedding. But when I pulled into his gravel driveway at dusk, he stepped out onto the porch like he'd been expecting me. He didn't say anything right away, just looked at me with that quiet understanding some people are born with. I remember standing there, feeling like I was going to fall apart, and all I said was, I didn't know where else to go. Colin nodded, opened the screen door and said, Then you're exactly where you need to be. That first night, we didn't talk much. We sat out on his back porch with whiskey and 2 blankets, listening to the wind in the trees. There was a fire pit crackling between us. I watched the embers float into the dark sky and tried to forget the feeling of Hannah's name on my tongue. Eventually, he broke the silence. You want the truth? He said slowly. Or are you just chasing something that's already dead? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Was I chasing proof? Closure? A reason to finally let go? Or was I just hoping naively that somehow all of it could be undone? That the letters I read weren't real? That the name she whispered wasn't what it seemed? I keep thinking maybe I misread it. I finally said, my voice rough. That maybe it's not what it looks like. Colin took a slow sip of his drink, then looked me in the eye. You already know the answer. You just haven't let yourself say it out loud. I didn't respond, but he was right. The next morning, I woke up in the guest room, wrapped in an old quilt that smelled like cedar and dust. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I moved. My phone had 13 missed calls from Hannah, for texts, and 1 voice message. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I walked outside. The air was cold and clean in a way I hadn't felt in months. Colin was chopping wood out back, and I joined him in silence. We didn't speak, but with every swing of the axe, I felt something cracking inside me. something deeper than anger, something older than heartbreak. That night, by the fire again, I told him everything. The pendant, the name, the letters, the way she looked at our son and called him my little R. He didn't react, just stared into the flames like he was watching the story burn along with the logs. After I finished, he nodded once. So what are you going to do now? I don't know, I said. You going back? Eventually. He raised an eyebrow. To what? That question sat heavy between us. To what? A marriage built on half-truths? A home filled with a silence I didn't know how to break? A child I loved more than anything, but now couldn't look at without wondering whose eyes he really had? I didn't answer, but the truth started forming in the silence. I wasn't going back to fix anything. I was going back to end it. I didn't rush back. Took me 3 more days to get in the car. I told Colin I'd be gone by morning, and he just nodded like he already knew. No judgment, no advice, just a handshake that turned into a hug and a quiet. You know where I am if you need the silence again. The drive back to Sacramento was long, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. Just inevitable. I didn't plan what I was going to say to Hannah. I didn't practice the speech. There was nothing left to rehearse. I wasn't going in looking for a fight. I just wanted the truth, said plainly, with no stories, no shaking hands, no tears to blur the edges. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was still on. The same bulb I'd replaced 2 weeks before our son was born. I remember thinking then, this is what it means to be a dad. Fixing things before they break. But some things don't give you a warning. She must have heard the car because she opened the door before I even got out. She looked like she hadn't slept. Hair tied up, eyes swollen, wearing one of my hoodies. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. She stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself like armor. Josh! I didn't respond. I walked past her, into the house. It smelled like baby powder and lavender detergent. Same as always. Too normal. She followed me inside, hesitant, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was walking into. I sat down on the couch and finally looked at her. Tell me the truth. She didn't pretend to not know what I meant. There was a beat of silence. Then she lowered herself onto the ottoman across from me, hands trembling in her lap. At first, she tried to spin it. I love you. It didn't mean anything. I was in a weird place back then. All the phrases I'd read 100 times in other people's stories. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk herself into a corner. When she started to cry, I waited. Then she said it. It was just a fling. His name is Ryder, isn't it? I asked even though I already knew. She nodded like it hurt her to admit it. When? I asked. How long before the pregnancy? Her voice cracked. A few months before. And you don't know if the baby is mine. She couldn't even lie. No, she whispered. I sat back, the words echoing in my head like a sh*T fired indoors. No, just like that, everything was laid bare. The timeline, the name, the pendant, the sleepless nights I spent trying to believe her. It all clicked into place, and the weight of it hit me hard but not like a collapse. More like a door slamming shut. I stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the manila folder I'd already prepared. Divorce papers, printed and signed. I handed them to her without a word. She looked at them like they were foreign, like she couldn't believe this was real. Josh, wait, please. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I said. You already did. Her voice grew sharper. You were distant. You weren't even around back then. I felt so alone. There it was. The shift. The blame. You could have talked to me, I said calmly. You could have said anything. But you made a choice. Don't put that on me. She stood up, tears pouring down her face now. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean for it to ruin us. Then maybe you shouldn't have called him our son's name while I was holding your hand in the delivery room. That stopped her cold. Her shoulders crumpled like the words physically broke her. But I didn't flinch. I didn't comfort her. I'd done enough of that for a lifetime. She stared at the papers for a long time before finally asking, Are you sure? I was sure the second I found the pendant, I said. This is just the follow-through. We signed the papers that night. No lawyers, no courtroom. Just two broken people at the kitchen table, with a pen that squeaked a little too loudly in the silence. She cried through it. I didn't. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I'd already mourned her the day I realized I didn't trust her anymore. And once trust is gone, love's just a memory you're renting until you finally give back the keys. After the divorce, Hannah didn't vanish. She called late at night, left voicemails that swung between sobbing apologies and sharp accusations. One text said, "I ruined us," followed by another, "You abandoned me." Then came the threats. She'd tell my parents I was unstable, or claim I'd yelled in front of the baby. I didn't respond. Not to the crying, not to the guilt. She'd lost the right to my attention. She sent a letter saying she wanted to start over, but her words rang hollow. Every message chipped away less and less. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb. I moved. New city, new number, new nameplate on my office door, school counselor. Quiet halls, calm days. People knew me only for who I am now, not who I used to be. Months passed. Then came one last letter from Hannah. "If you don't come back, I'll show them the photo of you crying. Let them see what a weak father you are." I folded it in half, slid it into a drawer, and went for a walk. The silence didn't scare me anymore. Healed me. She had lost me long before that letter, and I'd finally found myself.